Programming to tell you about something going on in Glendale right now. This is at the Bayshore Town Center, and we'll show you a picture of what's happening and being reported as a partial collapse of one of the parking garages at Bayshore. You can see it's the yellow garage, and for those familiar with that area, this is near the Trader Joe's. It's near the Goldfish Swim School, sort of on the southwest part of Bayshore's property. And if you look closely at this picture we have on the screen, you can see fire crews responding. They actually have shovels in their hand, and obviously we just got through a major winter storm with a lot of snow and ice in our area, and heavy snow at that. We do not know what led to this garage collapse at this point, but the snow and the weather certainly you would have to expect would be a factor in this. We also have not heard from officials yet if there have been any injuries. We are expecting to hear property damage for sure, with a number of cars parked in this garage at the time. But crews are searching for people in that collapsed garage, looking through the snow, looking through some of the destruction left behind. Again, this is all at Bayshore Town Center in Glendale, right near Whitefish Bay, one of the major shopping malls in our viewing area, dealing with something entirely different altogether today. A partial collapse of one of the parking garages. It looks like this is one of the ramps actually up part of that garage from the pictures that we've received so far. We do have crews at the scene for you at Bayshore Town Center. Multiple photographers on the scene. Our reporters are there as well, gathering more information for you at this time. We actually just spoke to someone who said he made the initial call. He works as a custodian or a janitor at the property there for Bayshore, and said he heard the sound first before he saw anything. Described it as almost feeling like an earthquake to some degree. As you can imagine, all the concrete in a structure like that. He made a call into officials and then saw what happened as fire crews responded to this scene. Again, this is happening in Glendale right now as we speak. A partial collapse of one of the parking garages at Bayshore Town Center. And as we gather more information from our crews at the scene, we will continue to cut into regular programming as needed to give you the very latest on something developing in southeastern Wisconsin on this Thursday morning. Just to recap, if you are just joining us or just tuned over, we are covering Bayshore Town Center, an incident there on the southwest part. This is a mall that's long established in Glendale, in that part of southeastern Wisconsin. Of course, went through a major redevelopment in the early 2000s, turning it into this town center feel. There's a mix of stores in the area, residential apartments and condos, as well as office space, all built in around a center outdoor area. But this is in the southwestern portion of the property, near the intersection of Port Washington and Silver Spring Road. The yellow parking garage, as we're able to give you a few more pictures here of what we are seeing. This is actually a live view from one of our photographers at the scene. You can see the emergency vehicles in the foreground there. You can also see some of the first responders in that structure looking through different parts to assess the damage and also see what else they will find under that snow and rubble. A large response from fire departments across southeastern Wisconsin here, and of course plenty of people watching as well. This is near a major grocery store, as I said, office space, residential areas, and a major intersection right off of Silver Spring Drive at this shopping mall. We're getting another look at what is happening inside. And I mentioned the snow, the ice from the winter storm that passed through Wisconsin this week. We're still dealing with the after effects of that today. You can see just the sheer amount of snow in that one picture, and again here in these live images from the scene as fire crews are looking on there. Concrete has fallen down. We're unclear if this is what was underneath it, if there were vehicles parked there at the time, though you have to imagine there may have been during the middle of a day at a busy shopping center. The sheer amount of snow, though, that potentially led to the weight on that structure. We are still waiting for official word from the City of Glendale officials, from the Milwaukee Fire Department, who we believe is on the scene as well, as to what exactly they got called for, what the cause of that collapse could be. Yes, we have had a lot of snow, and heavy snow at that, but these structures are built for that. They have hundreds of cars in them at different points of the holiday shopping season and the like. As we reset, we'll give you another bit of information here as we take a live look from our photographer's camera. Again, this is on the southwestern portion of Bayshore Town Center. Port Washington Road and Silver Spring meet at that major intersection, and just above that is the yellow parking garage, one of the many that they have on the property, but this is the one that we are focused on as you see some of the crews milling about, I'm sure awaiting their next command, trying to figure out exactly how to respond to this. We're used to seeing fire officials with hoses in hand, perhaps axes. We saw many of them with shovels as they try to deal with the snow and what they have to get through to even assess the damage from here. As I mentioned, we've had multiple crews at this scene for a period of time now, including one of our photographers was able to speak to someone who at least saw the aftermath of what happened here at Bayshore. And let's listen in to a firsthand account of what we're witnessing in Glendale.
So basically, the whole storage, the whole structure collapsed, and I was in the janitor's closet, just waiting there, and I just heard something in the background. We didn't know if it was like construction workers outside just doing what they doing, but we heard loud boom, boom, me and this other coworker, and I felt the walls shake. The walls were shaking. So went outside. I went to go continue my daily dues of doing work, and then that's when a lady came up to me and said, "Look," he said, "Sir, the front of the parking structure fell," and that's when I reported it.
So you were the one that called it in on the radio. Tell me exactly what did you do? What did you say?
I said dispatch. Part of the construction fell in front of the K building. And we need emergency calls coming through, all of that. And
so are you a worker here? You work here?
Yeah, I work. Yeah, I work here.
You at security, just or?
No, I'm a cleaner,
okay,
or janitor. Yeah,
sure.
On outside areas.
So what was you feeling in that moment? Like, were you scared? Were you nervous?
I felt like I was in danger for my life. Like the earthquakes was crazy. I felt it. Like it was like intensified, like so crazy.
So can you show me a few pictures of it?
Well, there you have it, a firsthand account of what is happening at Bayshore Town Center right now from a gentleman who works at the property. Said he both heard it and maybe more impressively there from that soundbite, felt it. Said it felt like an earthquake. And as you can imagine, the amount of snow, the amount of concrete that must have fallen here. We also have official word now from folks with Bayshore Mall, so a lot more to tell you here. First and foremost, the good news, they are currently at least not aware of any injuries from this partial collapse of a parking garage at Bayshore. Officials with the mall say they are not aware of any injuries, so that's the good news we want to get out right away. What they describe happened, though, they say there was a partial collapse of the second level of the parking structure into the first level. This is on the southwest side of the property, the Silver Spring parking garage. You'll see it in some of the pictures as well. It's labeled the yellow parking garage for those familiar with Bayshore. They also say that anyone who is parked on the third level, people who may have their cars still up there on the third level of that garage, they do not have access to their vehicles. As you can imagine, there's a lot to look into and investigate about the structural capabilities of that parking garage after the collapse. But the officials from the mall saying that the second level of this parking structure fell into the first. We do not know exactly how many cars were parked there at the time, both on the second level or potentially falling onto cars on the lower level. That is the street level of this parking garage. But officials do say they are not aware of any injuries from this partial collapse. They also add that Glendale Police and North Shore Fire are on the scene right now assessing the damage, and that's what we're seeing in this live picture from one of our other photographers at the scene. Massive amounts of concrete and the materials that make up that parking garage, complete rubble right now on street level. This is, if you're not familiar with Bayshore Shopping Mall, it's again a mixed-use facility, so there is a number of different stores, there are different office buildings, there's residential space here as well. Some people do live in the apartments and condos at the mall as we give you a wider look at that view and the different types of structures there. This is also very close to some of the more popular shopping areas. Trader Joe's supermarket is in the southwest part of Bayshore Mall, right next to this parking garage, though this appears to be at the east end of that garage, whereas Trader Joe's is at the west end of the garage. We're also seeing just the assessment happening right now. And of course, after what happened in the weather department in all of southeastern Wisconsin yesterday, the massive piles of snow, both in the foreground and potentially what could have led to some of this collapse. It was a very heavy snow, not the sort of white, light, puffy snow that we skiers out there certainly appreciate. This was a very wet snow right along that freezing temperature mark for much of the day yesterday as it came down in southeastern Wisconsin. We've seen the impact of ice in our southeastern counties. Kenosha and Racine counties dealing with all kinds of power outages today because of the ice that came with that storm. Here in the Milwaukee area and certainly to the north in Glendale, this is right along the border with Whitefish Bay, a heavier wet snow, and you're seeing just an absolute pile of that on top of whatever else fell in the parking structure at Bayshore Town Center. As the firefighters continue to assess things out there, we also got that firsthand account from a gentleman working at Bayshore who says he heard someone saying the parking garage has collapsed. He actually felt it, saying it felt like an earthquake in that yellow garage. And now the officials are trying to figure out exactly how this happened, exactly what is left both underneath. The good news from all officials that no one, to their knowledge, has been injured, or at least they are not aware of any injuries. But of course, the first responders, the Glendale Police Department, North Shore Fire is going to very carefully look through everything here to determine that that is in fact the case. We have photographers at the scene for you. We also are hearing from more and more people who experienced this today at Bayshore on a busy Thursday. Many people getting back to work and to regular life after so many cancellations for the snow yesterday. Let's listen to someone else on what they saw and experienced at Bayshore Town Center.
Everything had came down from the third floor all the way down to the ground floor. I shook. I tried to get up out of there. I got away. And then he had made the call over the radio because we work in that area, go around there picking up trash and everything. So when it came down, we just shocked like, what the hell going on? Yeah. So yeah, that's how it went.
How did something like that even happen? Do you know? Like,
we know exactly what happened. They say the snow removers was piling up snow up there.
yeah.
So it got too high and it just all collapsed.
Yeah.
It couldn't handle that. It was weak. Like all that snow was on top of the construction.
So it came from the snow.
Yeah.
Were there any problems before? Like, did they have any structural damage beforehand?
No.
A couple months ago, they were just restoring that over there.
Yeah, so they were just working on it or something, I guess. But now all of a sudden it just
collapsed. Everything.
They put too much snow on top of it.
Too much pressure.
And all of it just came down. I don't know if anybody over there, but
We don't know.
we'll find out.
We know we just shook. Our whole body just shook, man.
Yeah.
We thought something would happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's crazy.
Yeah, we just pray nobody was hurt
Under
in
there.
this event right here. We just hope everybody was
Yeah,
nobody
we
under
up
there.
here every day, and nothing like this never happened.
Man.
You know what I'm saying?
How important?
That is certainly hope of all of us, of course, that there are, in fact, no injuries from this. A partial collapse of the parking garage at Bayshore Town Center. And we just heard from a few people there. The gentleman on the right says that he works there at Bayshore, a member of the custodial or janitor staff for the property, and that he actually radioed in when someone told him that the garage had collapsed. This picture is one of the clearest views we've gotten so far of what those gentlemen were talking about. A mass amount of snow piled up in the parking garage. Now, some of that I should say is speculation. We don't know exactly what caused a collapse at this point. That will be up to investigators and the first responders and officials there at the property. But you could also assume, as that gentleman did, that a lot of it had to do with the weather that we received over the last 24 hours or so here in southeastern Wisconsin. A lot of snow. The mall folks would have been clearing that snow, of course, getting it out of the way for drivers to return to the property today. As we give you this live look, a different angle looking into what is left from that area, Another update from mall officials here. They described that this was specifically the second level of the parking structure, the yellow garage at Bayshore Town Center, that collapsed onto the first level. And if you're not familiar, if you haven't been to Bayshore, the first level is actually the street level. So this would be a level above the second level that fell onto the street level. They also say, mall officials, that there are cars on the third level of this parking garage as well. Though if that's your car, if you're someone who works there or someone who parks there, you do not have access to that third level yet. Of course, as officials continue to assess the damage, see if the collapse is complete or if there's any other thing to be worried about. And as they continue to look through the rubble there, you see one firefighter there holding a shovel. A lot of snow to sift through, to dig through, and what's underneath the concrete and rubble left behind from the second level of that parking garage. To reset, if you're just joining us here, this is happening in Glendale, Wisconsin, just north of Milwaukee. Bayshore Town Center, a very popular mall, a mixed-use facility that has both stores, residential living places, office space for many, and a series of parking garages as well. And that includes the yellow parking garage where this happened on the southwest corner of the Bayshore property. That is near the intersection of Port Washington Road and Silver Spring. There's a string of businesses that have their space there along Silver Spring. That includes Trader Joe's, that includes Goldfish Swim School. I believe there's a gym there and others. And then just to the north of that building is where this yellow parking garage is. So that is where we are following here as we continue to bring you updates on this. The good news from mall officials: to their knowledge, they are not aware of any injuries at this time. That will, of course, be up to police and firefighters to determine for sure, but that's the initial good news. We do also have Ben Handelman joining me here as we begin the shift change at Fox 6 from a morning anchor to an evening one. But both of us, Ben and myself, very familiar with this property. I know we take our kids here. It's a popular spot all throughout the year with a series of events on the yard there, the town center, that they've continued to redevelop over the years since the major renovations to Bayshore in the early 2000s, and now what they've done more recently as well. But a terrible scene there as we see the mass amount of snow that may have led to this partial collapse of the second level of a parking structure at Bayshore.
Carl,
Ben,
good to be joining you. I will say I was at Bayshore an hour before this happened.
Wow.
I was at the Kohl's right across the street, and I can tell you what was happening an hour before this happened. Normal day at Bayshore Mall, but the snow removal operation was underway. They had the large tractors out, you know, as they're moving snow around. And I will say this is that parking structure, as you've been mentioning, that's right by the Trader Joe's. Very popular for people to park on that lower first floor because, as you mentioned, that's where all the businesses are, the swim school, the Qdoba. There's some doctor's offices that use that parking structure. But the second floor is usually pretty empty. I don't know a lot of people who have actually ever been up on that second floor. So what's so surprising about this is that these structures obviously are built to hold a lot of weight. Full parking structures, and this is one of those parking structures at Bayshore, and Carl, you probably agree with this, not usually full.
Certainly the case. I mean, hard to find a spot maybe on the first level, but if that's the case, you go up to the second or third and there's no problem whatsoever. I think often it's employees who maybe park their cars up there for a little easier access. Ben, you could speak to this, just maybe how much snow you saw being moved around, because some of these images, I mean, as you would expect from any mall or any structure in the area, is going to have a lot after what we saw yesterday, but maybe the fact that they were moving it to that second level could be what led to what we're seeing here.
And this is raising a whole bunch of questions that we're seeing this massive pile of snow, because that would not be normal to be moving snow up onto, obviously, anywhere onto the parking structure. Now, the tractor that I saw, that was in the Kohl's parking lot, and I'm not sure that heavy equipment could actually go into this parking structure, because you see that little yellow bar right on the center of your screen? That's the height indicator, and you really can't have a very tall vehicle to go inside this parking structure. But obviously, this giant mound of snow raising a lot of questions. Why was it piled like that, and how has it affected? Now, I will say, as we're looking at this partial collapse of this parking structure, on the left and on the right, that is a ground level, and in the middle, that is where the parking ramp is that goes up to the second floor, and it looks like that's where the activity has been. But as you can see, the good news, Nobody's working on the pile, so they do not believe, as at least our first indications, that anyone was hurt or was inside the areas that were affected. And you can see there's not a lot of urgency from the fire department. I will say the Milwaukee Fire Department, Glendale North Shore Fire Department, they're skilled. They would bring in Milwaukee to help. They've got urban rescue teams that if they needed them, they are on standby. They are trained, heavily trained to handle something like this. But obviously, we're not seeing anybody in the parking structure, and that is good news as this thing apparently has collapsed. Carl, I will tell you, I live nearby, and obviously with our winter storm that we've had, everybody's had different kinds of precip. I mean, if you're down in Kenosha, you have had no snow, you've had ice. If you're up in Sheboygan, you've dealt with the heavy snow. I woke up in the North Shore to several inches of it's the heavy concrete, tough to move at the end of your driveway kind of snow. So this stuff was heavy that fell. And look at, as we're zooming in there, you can see the concrete that has fallen down here. But yeah, this was heavy snow. So if they would have put a bunch of this snow in one spot, presumably that could have an effect on the parking structure. But again, these parking structures are built to withstand heavy loads, as they're, obviously they're supposed to be full of cars usually.
Yeah, intuitively you think like, okay, holiday shopping season, if that place is full of cars, how could that possibly be heavier than a pile of snow? But as you said, Ben, you're used to seeing those mountains of snow in a parking lot on street level, not necessarily in a parking garage, not necessarily all piled up like that as well. But another good note from you as well, that we're not seeing maybe a flurry of activity like we would if there were fears that there were people stuck underneath that pile. You described the ramp too, because again, this is street level. They say the second level of this parking garage fell, and that does appear to be like where the ramp from the first level to the second is. I can't remember, Ben, but maybe you're more familiar. I don't think there are parking spots, or at least not many, underneath the ramp on the back end of that. So it's not like it would have carried over a whole line of cars necessarily.
If you go to the other side, if you're on the Trader Joe's side, there are a few, I believe, parking spots that go underneath the ramp. But as you said, there's not very many, and it's not the most popular spot to park. A lot of people are parking closer to the buildings on the left and right, or on the back side that appears to be unaffected by the Trader Joe's. I will tell you, I took the highway in just to race in here to the studio. You can't tell from the other side that anything's going on at Bayshore. Obviously, there's different parking garages. So there's the one that you really can see from the highway. There's apartments that use that, and there's actually an entrance right off the freeway that you would drive into a parking structure. That's not this parking structure. This is on the south side of the property, where if you're at the Kohl's, it's right across the street, or if you're at the Trader Joe's, that's on the other side of this parking structure. But again, it is pretty well used on the bottom floor because there are all those businesses. Carl mentioned there's a swim school that is right there. There's a couple of restaurants, a sub shop, a burrito shop, and then there's some doctor's offices I know that use the office building on the second floor, not of the parking structure, but obviously the buildings nearby. So there are usually a lot of cars on the first floor, but not on the second floor. But again, it appears, Carl, we're seeing some good news here is everybody's kind of backed off and they're hanging out. And I will say this too, Carl, a lot of cameras in this structure. So you would think that first responders, that'd be one of the first things they would go and look at. What happened at the time of the collapse? They would be able to see if anybody was inside the structure and what happened to them.
Yeah, and immediately know where to look right off the bat like that. One other note, Ben, you mentioned the swim school. We happen to take our girls there, so I just happen to know this, not from any diligent reporting on my regard, but they actually canceled their swim classes for the morning because of the winter weather we had in the aftermath of some of the snow and ice. So that's, again, more good news for some of the first responders. Perhaps there were not as many people at that location as would normally be on a typical Thursday morning because of what we got yesterday into today, although on the flip side, what we got has apparently led to this as we see the piles of snow, and as you were describing, that really heavy, wet snow building up over there. You mentioned the parking garage as well for people who are familiar or drive around. I think the thing that I noticed, first of all, Ben, was the murals. That's how you knew exactly what garage this was, those flowers painted on the side on both ends, whether it's at Trader Joe's or looking from the east end and where Kohl's is as well. Not the biggest parking garage that they have at Bayshore, but certainly a popular one on the first floor at least.
And there is a lot of construction happening around Bayshore. They're putting new apartments kind of on the other side, but this is part of the old structure. There's new ownership at Bayshore that have taken over the last few years, but this, I would call it part of the original structure. This has been there kind of since they've redone Bayshore. And now we can see a drone there. I wonder if that is law enforcement that may be going in just to, yeah, you can see there's, is that a, can we zoom in on that police officer? He's got a drone. So
yeah, I don't think it's hobbyists getting in there, right?
Right. Well, I didn't know if it was a news crew maybe, but no, yeah, that is definitely a police officer. So it just shows you kind of the new technology that officers have. Why go into a parking structure that's just partially collapsed when you don't have to? Let's send the drones in and get a good look, and they'll be able to see structurally what happened here, what caused this to fail, because obviously the first thing you want to do is make sure everybody's okay and that the rescue operations are underway. The second thing you're going to do is see what happened here, and the investigation would happen immediately, but obviously that will take some time.
If you're just joining us here at 2:05 on a Thursday afternoon as we're breaking into regular programming at Fox 6, this started more than an hour ago now. Just before 1 o'clock, we heard word of what they said at the time was a potential parking garage collapse. Turns out to be the case at Bayshore Town Center. So this has been more than an hour now, about an hour and 15 minutes since we got first word that something was going down at the shopping mall. And to reset as well, this is on the southwest part of the property, the yellow parking garage near the intersection of Port Washington and Silver Spring. But as Ben said, you have to get past a couple of those buildings before you actually get to the parking garage kind of nestled into the larger Bayshore property there. We have heard from mall officials that they are at least not aware of any injuries at this time. That is very good news to report. Also, a few more descriptions from them saying this was the second level of the parking garage that collapsed onto the first. And the first is the street level in this case. There are also cars, according to them, on the third level. As we give you a new angle here, a new view at some of the damage for some drivers. That is terrible if you're watching at home and you realize that's your car, or maybe watching at work at this time. Looks like a black sedan, a Hyundai, that is just smashed on the left from the snow and the other debris that would have fallen from the second level. Again, from mall officials, the third level still actually does have some cars parked up there. If that is your car, you will not have access to that vehicle for a while as they continue to investigate and test the structural integrity of the rest of the garage.
Well, not only that, if it is the ramp that went down, not only can you not get in there to get your car out, there is no way to get your car out because there's only one ramp that goes up to the second floor and then another ramp that goes up to the third floor. So if your car is on the second or third floor, that thing's going to be sitting there for a while as they try and figure out, A, what's wrong with this structure, and B, what do we do next? Now, the good news, we're talking about damages to vehicles and not damage to humans or loss of life that we do not think happened. Again, we do believe that they had a good eye on this with the cameras that they probably have at Bayshore. They would have known right away whether or not, oh, look at that. That's a new picture that we've got in. And again, a lot of questions. Why is all the snow piled up in one spot? I can tell you, as someone who was at Bayshore about an hour before this occurred, I was at the Kohl's right across the street, and everything was normal there. The snow removal operation was underway, and my focus was on returning something at Kohl's, so I wasn't focused in on this parking structure, but there were crews moving all of this heavy concrete-like snow out of the area, and they were piling it up in some areas. Like I was in the Kohl's parking lot, and they were making a giant mountain out of snow. Was that happening in this parking structure? We do not know at this time.
Ben, just to cut in, does seem to be the case. What you're saying, we're not sure. We heard from a gentleman earlier who was at the property and said that he saw them moving snow into that area as well. So again, is that a normal operation at Bayshore after a snow event like this? We are not sure. Those are all questions we will have to ask for the officials and the crews that were working this. But one of the people that we spoke to, one of our photographers spoke to live at that scene, as we give you another angle here at some of the destruction and the fire crews looking into the damage left behind. This person at the mall said that he saw them moving snow up to the second level or onto the second level, and we're seeing the aftermath of that, falling down onto the first, onto street level, and at least one car we can see clearly on the right side of the screen there, smashed as a result.
And parking is at a premium at Bayshore, at least on the ground level, right? So they're trying to clear spaces for shoppers. And then, as we said, they don't use that second and third level. So were they moving snow from that, there's a parking lot right outside of this parking structure that is used a lot. Were they moving that snow up to the second floor to kind of put it in a spot that they didn't think a lot of people used? That could be. I will tell you, just the fact of where we're getting this live picture from, and we're seeing all of the crews inside this parking structure, this would not be the case if they thought any of the other parking structure was at risk. So they must have some confidence that the rest of the structure will not fall down. Let's go out to Gabrielle Mays, just arrived on scene. Gabby, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so pretty much I've been seeing kind of what you guys have been seeing, but a lot of people have been coming up to me because this is fairly popular. One man said, oh, hey, I go to Trader Joe's all the time. And he said, I was there and I just wanted to see what was going on. And so he says he happened to look and see, and he goes, that parking structure, he's like, from his experience and what he's seen so far, he's like, not a lot of people park there. He says a lot of people kind of park more so by Trader Joe's. So in his opinion, he said, really lucky that, not a lot of people were parked there, and that's not really a popular parking spot. So that's what he had to say about it. But now I think it's just kind of a lot of people just watching, kind of wanting to see what's going on. A lot of people ask me, what do you see, what's going on? When did this happen? So, it's really so much so of like just people kind of watching and waiting. We're still waiting to hear from North Shore. Obviously, we've seen some of the fire trucks. I saw a lot of people, or a lot of firefighters, I should say, they were getting out shovels. So it seems like they were going to do that. I also saw some equipment, like they're going to try to dig some of those pieces, it looks like concrete pieces that are kind of just set into the snow. I did see online one woman said, yeah, and Ben, you mentioned this, she goes, I'm not going to be getting to my car anytime soon. So that's kind of where we are at right now.
No, certainly
we're
not.
Kind of just kind of waiting to hear for official word.
Gabrielle, could I ask you a question here? Ben made a very good point that maybe the best thing we're seeing right now is people are not running, right? There's no rush from the fire officials and safety officials.
And
do you notice that as well?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I noticed as soon as we pulled up. Nobody was running. It didn't seem like anybody was in a hurry. And so for the most part, it's kind of just like waiting, right? A lot of waiting, because when there's really a serious emergency, you're going to see running, and you're also going to see us getting pushed back, which is just not happening right now, which is really an indication of really a good thing. So right now, you can see here, you've got the vehicles that are kind of starting to remove the Bearcat, that's starting to remove the snow. So they're kind of just going in there, and it seems like to me, that's where they're at right now. But yeah, no, it doesn't seem as if there's really any instance of concern. I'm not seeing that on faces. A lot of firefighters were talking to people as they walked by when people were asking questions. So it wasn't like this, not what you would normally see if it was a serious emergency.
Rob Haswell, our meteorologist, our chief meteorologist here at Fox 6, telling us that the snow, Brian, tell it to me again, our producer. 13 pounds per square foot with this heavy, wet snow. That is how much this heavy snow weighs. I can tell you from experience, all I had to do this morning was shovel the very end of my driveway, and it took me about 30 minutes. It's that kind of snow. It is the back-breaking kind of snow. And presumably, as I said, I was at Bayshore just about an hour before this happened, and the snow removal operation was underway. If you pile up all of this heavy snow in one spot into a mountain, that can create problems. And we do have a lot of questions. Why is the snow so high in that one spot inside of a parking structure on the parking ramp here?
Yeah,
so
with the level above it as well, because again, this is apparently the second level, so would not have been exposed to the elements like even the third level above that would have been. And then, of course, this is probably more a structural engineering question, but we're seeing the massive concrete, the structure here. It's built to hold a lot of weight. So what was it about the displacement of that snow? What was it about the way that was packed in there that would lead to a structural collapse like this in a parking garage at Bayshore Town Center?
Gabby, from your vantage point, can you see anything on the second floor? Can you see, is there any snow removal equipment that you can see from there?
You're talking to someone who's 5'1", so no, I'm sorry, I cannot see above there, so I apologize for that. I can see something moving, but I'm a shorty, so I really can't see that high. Justin, you see anything up there by chance? Anything? No, he can't see. We're too far on the ground level, but we can see the bottom, like ground level floor. We just continue to see they are removing the snow and the concrete. So that part we can see, but I can't see anything above the second or third floor.
I don't think even Ben, at how tall he is, would be able to see over that angle as well. So no worries
right,
there.
Yeah.
Even our camera on a tripod can't see. Gabby, were you able to go to maybe on your way in, the other side of the structure?
Real quick, guys, real quick, guys, we're being told they're going to give a statement, so we're going to run over there.
Yep, we do want to hear
go
that.
ahead and get that from North Shore. Okay, we'll be right. We'll
Yes,
be back
indeed.
with that.
Gabrielle Mays reporting from Bayshore Town Center this morning as we are seeing another live picture of one of our many crews at the scene, giving you a view of some of the damage, at least for one driver left behind here. Though the word from mall officials is good that they are not aware of any injuries to any people. Property, though, that's a different story.
Look at that vehicle. That is crushed inside this parking structure. Again, they're calling this a partial collapse. And I will tell you, from the other side, if you're driving by, like a lot of people will, on I-43 today, if you're looking at it, you can't tell that anything's wrong. It's kind of on the other side. You have to be at the Kohl's looking towards the Trader Joe's. That is the pile of snow. As Carl was talking, we've talked to some witnesses who say that they were moving snow into the parking structure, and that's when this collapse happened. And very quickly, firefighters from North Shore, they were on scene. We're seeing police officers. This is in Glendale, right on the Whitefish Bay. Milwaukee's right down the road. And we know if they would need experts from some of those urban recovery teams, they would have been called as well. Those would have come from Milwaukee. But right now, you can see this is no longer looking like a first responder response, but a cleanup response as they're bringing in the Bearcats, Carl, to bring out all of this snow.
And that's good news. Good to see there. One of the other things that struck me from some of the interviews we've aired already this afternoon, Ben, we spoke to one gentleman who says he works at Bayshore. He's a member of the custodian or janitorial staff there. And more so than anything, he heard the sound and he felt it. He described it as feeling almost like an earthquake. And as you can imagine, that amount of snow and all of the concrete and rubble underneath it that came down, what that must have felt like for someone nearby. He didn't actually see the collapse, but heard someone say it, that this had happened, and actually radioed in that we need to get people here because something just went down in the parking garage, the yellow garage at Bayshore Town Center.
Any minute now, we're going to hear from North Shore Fire. They are congregating. That's where Gabrielle Mays is running over to. And I think are they walking up to the microphone? Can we take that shot, guys? Just we'll keep it here until they start talking. Oh, yeah, they're letting some of the media members kind of gather around now.
As you can imagine, this is, middle of the day on a popular shopping mall Thursday afternoon as many people are trying to get back to life after the world sort of shut down in southeastern Wisconsin with the snow and ice yesterday. And then this happens as potentially the result of all of that winter weather we got yesterday.
Trying to see who's on scene here. It does look like this is just the local officials from the North Shore Fire Department as they continue to gather around here. You know, our crews from kind of early on, Carl, they haven't been asked to step very far back, so They must have known very early on that the most of the structure was okay. There didn't seem to be any concern that this whole structure was also going to come down. Again, that picture you're looking at, that is where the ramp is that would go up to the second floor, right in the middle of this parking structure. So that is where all the focus is, and that is where a bunch of snow had been moved to before this partial collapse happened.
And you described it, Ben, for people who are not familiar with that parking garage. It's not like you go up one direction and then to exit the garage you go down a separate ramp. It is up and down the same way. And let's listen in now as we're getting word from officials at Bayshore.
Coordinated response with the North Shore Fire and Rescue and the Milwaukee Fire Department. At this point, any inquiries in the future, you'll want to talk with the North Shore Fire Department as well as with Bayshore. I'm going to turn it over to the chief from the North Shore Fire Department as well as the assistant chief from the Milwaukee Fire Department to give a report. Good afternoon. My name is Robert. Common spelling, last name W-H-I-T-A-K-E-R, Whitaker. I'm the fire chief with North Shore Fire Rescue. About 12:15 today, we were dispatched to what's commonly called the Silver Spring parking garage at Bayshore Mall. That's the building directly behind us for a report that the part of the parking structure had collapsed. Our initial response to that type of incident does bring a large number of resources from not only our department, but the City of Milwaukee Fire Department and their structural collapse team, or heavy urban rescue team. Assistant Chief Dwayne Smoots is with us also today. Companies on scene found that a portion of the structure had collapsed from the third floor down in a pancake-type collapse. There were 2 cars known to be in the collapse area. The cars were it was unknown if they were occupied, and unknown if there's any pedestrian traffic. It's a large pedestrian traffic area with the various stores and shopping center here. We have now worked through watching video of security video of that area. Bayshore Mall has a large video presence throughout the property. We were able to view that video, and we feel, based on that video, and also talking to the owner of the 2 cars that are in the snow pile behind us, that there is no one in that space. We are, however, working now to use some heavy equipment just to remove the snow that's piled there and some of the structural members, just to verify that. We would like to see that with our own eyes, but the video is very clear, and our team is highly confident that there was no one in that area when this happened. So luckily, we, at this point, have no injuries. We are going to probably be here at least another hour, removing some of the snow and the debris. The heavy urban rescue team and the structural collapse unit is working with the property owner's engineering firm and the manufacturer of some of the spans of concrete that are there on the engineering side of all this, to make sure that it is indeed not in danger of any further collapse. And they have people on site now, and I'm assuming they'll have people on site for the next several hours. There are cars in that parking garage that are unaffected by the actual collapse, but are unable to exit because this is the sole ramp outside of this to get out of the garage. Bayshore Mall is working with their security and the Glendale police on the process to recover people, to at least get to their cars to recover items that they may want to get out, but we do not expect they'll be able to remove those cars yet today. So with that, I would take any questions.
How can you tell us about structural engineering, about regulations, how often these types of structures should be checked?
I am not familiar with that type of...
You know who is?
Boy, I would say that's probably going to be, the building inspector was here, but I'm not familiar if that's in their realm of responsibility.
You talked about the stability of the remaining structure here. You do have people working underneath it right now. How confident are you that that's safe for them to be doing?
Yeah, we have, before we did that, after we have verified we didn't have a life safety issue, we are much more confident moving them in there, that we've conferred with the engineers and they're confident that it's a safe space to work. It's not something that we would want general pedestrian traffic in, but enough that we're willing to take that risk to get in there to actually make sure we don't have any life safety issues.
How long before pedestrian traffic can resume and people can get their cars that are stuck in there?
Months, potentially.
Months, potentially?
Yeah, it's going to be a while. I mean, that is the ramp down to get out.
Yeah.
So, and literally from the 3rd floor down, it's a wide open hole.
So, Chief, is it, what you're telling us then is that's not just shards of concrete, that the actual ramp is damaged?
The actual ramp, the 3rd floor is in the 1st floor right now.
So it's not as easy as just moving those 2nd and 3rd floors so they can drive down?
Well, I mean, I guess if they got an engineer to say that it's safe, they maybe could do that, but that's beyond mine.
The students who are in here who are being held, are they being let out? I know I was speaking with some students who said that their friends were in class, that they were being held in and not evacuated from the building. Are they allowed to leave yet?
Yeah, I'm not aware, unless the property had or the school had done something to hold their students. We did not ask for anything to happen to pull people into the building.
Clarification. I mean, was it because of the snow or snow removal? I mean, was it all sitting there and that's why it collapsed? Do we know why?
I don't know why yet, but it appears snow would be some likely impact to the collapse.
I mean, there's more snow that's there than anywhere else. I mean, the concentration of snow, fair to say.
I think it's a fair statement.
Do you know if snow had been piled up in that area, like plowed into a...
I don't know. Yeah.
Did the video show
I'm sorry.
a car like just about to enter when the roof collapsed?
I'm not aware of that. I have not personally seen that video.
How many cars are you saying? 2 have been affected, but how many cars total were?
I don't have a good estimate off the top of my head. We can get that for you, but I would be guessing if I told you.
Is that video be made public?
That's going to be property of Bayshore Mall, so that would be something they'd have to have for
Mayor,
you.
can we talk to you for just a minute, just about, I mean, this is obviously an important property here in Glendale. I mean, what does this mean to the community to have this happen, and does it raise concerns about other structures here on the property?
Well, I mean, I think anytime this happens, we've certainly seen this around the Milwaukee area before, right, where there have been incidents like this, it certainly does raise concerns. But our experience with the redevelopment of Bayshore and the huge expansion that's taking place on the north and east side, is they're getting regularly inspected. As a matter of fact, the Glendale building inspector was here for a series of inspections in the apartments that are being built, so he walked over to see what was going on here. So we're regularly working with the folks at Bayshore. So I mean, I'm confident that we'll continue to have a strong relationship with Bayshore. We may have a limited amount of parking here on the southwest side of the property for a while, but there's certainly I certainly don't have any concerns about other structural problems on the property.
Do you consider this like a stroke of luck? I mean, people park here every day. I talk to plenty of people. A stroke of luck.
I was parked here yesterday when I went to Trader Joe's.
Yeah,
I absolutely. I mean, we certainly dodged a bullet on this one. We certainly did.
How old is the structure?
This would have been built in 2005 and 6. Bayshore reopened with the redevelopment in 2006.
Do you know who the engineering firm was?
I don't. That would probably, I'd have to talk with my city planner to find that. So.
Is it the city that's in charge of inspections and regulation?
So the city does inspections, yes, but there is an engineer for Bayshore, and I would ask you to refer any questions about engineering directly to Bayshore because they hire their own engineers.
Mayor, the chief couldn't address this. Maybe you can, since the inspector is your employee. What was his assessment of what he saw when he came here?
I didn't get a full assessment from him, other than he came and walked around and looked at the property, and he felt confident enough that he could go back over to continue his inspection of the apartments.
So he left and he moved on.
Yeah.
No. Generally, those guys, those inspectors are they're not engineers, so they are, from a legal perspective, have the ability to restrict access to things. They're not necessarily the guy that's or the person that's gonna come and do engineering access.
Do you think this is a case where you need an engineer or inspector to come in, since Bayshore is kind of engineering their own property here? Do you need to have your own better eyes on this than Bayshore's people and just trusting their word for it?
So there are a series of inspections that take place. It's not just Bayshore's engineers that sign off on their own work. I mean, there are state inspectors as well. Yeah.
Chief, I got a question. There are a lot of parking garages, not only here, but across the area, all got hit by the same amount of snow. Advice to anyone who's in charge of one of those today?
Yeah, so we did, the police department working with us did do a visual check of the other parking garages on this property, just so we had an idea of whether or not there was any sort of risk. I would clarify my statement that we're not positive snow is the cause of the collapse, but we likely think it's involved. And so, yeah, I mean, yesterday's snow was heavier than most snow. I mean, I went out and snowblowed and plowed my driveway twice yesterday and this morning. I got a good workout, and it was probably some of the heaviest snow I've dealt with in a while. And you can see just walking around, you have a lot of water, so heavier the snow, more weight, that gives you a risk. So piling snow on a property is probably, especially that's elevated, not a good idea.
We had a couple of people, Chief, tell us about some crumbling concrete inside, some regular parkers here who are here often throughout the week. What did you see inside as you're assessing whether it's safe for your crews to operate?
So I haven't personally been in there. We had members of our team in there. They did not see anything that led them to believe to be concerned.
Can this be repaired?
That would be a question that I would leave to an engineer. Yeah.
When did the city last inspect the garage?
So the city does not do the inspections of the garages. We have other outside inspectors that do those. So.
Do you know when the last time?
I don't. I'd have to check with my city planner on that.
Generally, inspections of buildings, like a store, those are done, like a fire inspection, that's done annually. The parking garages, because they're not occupied spaces, they don't fall in that space. So I'm not familiar with who would be responsible for that.
Mayor, can I just ask you, when you first heard about this happening, I mean, what were your first thoughts? What were your fears? How are you feeling now with what seems to have happened here?
Obviously, I was concerned that there might have been a loss of life. I'm very happy to hear from the fire and rescue folks that they're confident that there aren't any people under there. So that was my first concern. I actually was on my way to leave to take my wife to the airport. She drove herself and paid to park, so because I felt it was more important to be here, obviously.
So our intention, we will put out a press release with any more details, something in writing for all you. Send it to your news desks probably in the next 2 hours. And we'll be here about an hour at least just to we want to get eyes on what's underneath this pile. But at this point, we're fairly confident there's no one in that space.
And ultimately, you said it could be upwards of a month before people can get their cars out of here?
Yeah, I think that depending on what the engineers can come up with, the ramp that you physically drive down is the space that's impacted. So that's the one way in and out of this garage.
Chief, what's the technique here? There's folks there, you see the bobcats, you see firefighters with hand shovels. What is the technique to use?
So for now, they're doing the hand shovels we used earlier. We wanted to, until we could verify occupancy, it's a little less. If you have someone in there, you don't want to be picking it up with a bobcat if you don't have to. Now they're just coming up with a game plan to actually move that snow out and probably pile it up here with the front end loaders, and then we'll watch as they go and hopefully get a visual on the cars and can come back and tell you guys later that no one's in there. All right, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
It's Fire Chief Robert.
You've been listening to officials from North Shore Fire as well as the mayor of Glendale, Brian Kennedy, discussing a partial collapse of the parking garage at Bayshore Town Center. And a couple of the main takeaways, first and foremost, they were able to use the video system there at Bayshore to quickly and accurately and confidently determine that there were no injuries from this. There were vehicles hit with the snow and rubble that fell from the second level of that parking garage, but they were fairly sure from an early stage that there were no injuries to any people as the result of this. But the other takeaway from that official with North Shore Fire, he says it could be months before some people get their cars back. That is because the ramp that collapsed in this parking garage is the only way in or out. So if your car is on the second level or the third level of this garage, you may not have access to it for months until they're able to actually maybe rebuild or reform a way to get cars up and down. Gabrielle Mays is standing by. She was listening to that press conference live there in person. Ben Handelman handling our coverage in the studio as we go on now, guys. More than an hour and a half of this since the first call came into our newsroom of this structure collapse. Gabrielle, since you were listening there live, what stood out to you from that briefing?
Well, the mayor said something that really stood out, right? I mean, I asked him, I'm like, hey, this is a parking structure. People park in it. So the big thing was, he said, we dodged a bullet. He says he goes to Trader Joe's all the time. And he's like, I even park over there. So he's like, this could have been a lot worse. And it's one of the reasons why he said he felt like he had to be here today. But he also said that he was really grateful that no one was hurt. I mean, another thing that we learned was that the collapse happened on the third floor, and they called it a pancake collapse. So once it hit, it kind of went down all the way to the ground floor. We also learned that at least 2 cars are underneath that rubble that you see. Obviously, we know those people are not getting their cars back, but we also learned something else, which is these cars, it could take months for them to get out. They did say that they will work with people to make sure if they wanted something out of their cars, they'll try their best to make sure that people can get that. Those cars are not coming out of here because, Ben, you mentioned this, and Carl, I think you said it as well, there's really only one way in and one way out. So they got to figure out, once this is all secure, how are they going to get those cars out? So I think that's some of the biggest things that I learned here today. And you know, the other thing was, he didn't say officially that it was snow, but he said it most likely, or it does play a role or a factor in this particular collapse, which we know we had our snowstorm the past day and a half. So, I mean, those are some of the key things that I think we learned here today.
Yeah, sometimes we got to use our own eyes, and I see a giant mountain of snow right where that pancake collapse happened. Gabby, can you talk about the importance of video here? They knew very quickly that there were 2 cars that were crushed, and they used that video to make sure they knew pretty quickly nobody was inside.
Right. I mean, that's obviously the key. And, you know, as we all know, most businesses these days, especially the small, has surveillance video. So they said we were able to kind of scroll back, look at the video. That's how they knew. And they were confident, they said, that no one was injured as far as being in any of those cars or even walking around. I mean, that was key. If they didn't have that video, they would not have known, really. And that's why they said in the beginning they were using shovels, because they were concerned if someone was under that, they can't just use a Bearcat to remove stuff. So, I mean, they were overly cautious. And then once they realized that the surveillance video existed, that's when they took a look at it and made sure that they were able to, make sure that nobody was under there.
And we knew quickly on that they've already talked to the owners of those 2 vehicles that have been crushed. A lot of work going on behind you. We're seeing some engineers behind you and then some Bearcats. What's happening right now, Gabby?
Yeah, well, it sounds as if, and I mean, the car is kind of, the fire truck is kind of in the way, so I'm kind of peeking through here. I mean, from what I can see, I'm just seeing the Bearcats moving stuff. I don't know exactly where that sound is coming from, but I guess I can kind of like sneak around and just see before they push me out of here. Okay, it looks like some sort of saw. So it looks like they're cutting up the concrete in order to possibly maybe remove it a little bit easier, but that's what they're doing. That's what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing the sparks flying from that saw. So that's what's happening right now, and I'm thinking after that, the Bearcats that are kind of sitting there will then start picking that up and moving it.
And if you think about it, Gabby, I mean, it's the snow, certainly, and that seems to be part of the problem here, but then you have just pounds and pounds of concrete, steel bars, rebar inside that as well, a whole mess to be cleaned up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And I mean, if you, like you said, I mean, these are not small pieces. I mean, there's no way, you know, any of us, like, unless you're like maybe possibly a bodybuilder, could like even pick those up. But now, I mean, I think it's just a matter of like cutting them up so that then they can remove them. I mean, these are big chunks. They're not small at all. I mean, they're humongous. And like you said, they've got the rebar in there. So there's also, you know, just safety as far as making sure that none of that is harming the firefighters.
And I can tell you from experience of shoveling my driveway and the Advil that I will need tonight, how heavy this snow is. Rob Haswell telling us it's 13 pounds per square foot. And we're talking about an entire mound of snow. It looks like that was on that third floor of the parking structure. We do know, I can tell you from my experience of being at Bayshore about an hour before this happened, that the snow removal process was happening all throughout the property. They had different pieces of equipment that were piling snow in different spots to obviously open up parking spaces at this parking structure. But it is of note, during the press conference, they say, well, they think snow is a factor. They don't know exactly right now why the parking structure came down. Gabby said it. They said it's a pancake collapse, meaning the third floor came down onto the second floor, and then the second floor came down onto the first floor. And Carl, you can see they are still probably taking witness statements there as investigators are kind of sharing notes there.
Well, and so many questions still to come from this. This is partly why it helps to have a weather expert on your team. Rob, also putting this in perhaps a way that we can understand. Think about a cubic foot of snow. So a cube of snow, a foot wide, foot deep, 20 pounds, and that's just one of those. We've seen some of the images of the massive pile. You can imagine how much weight that would be. But the questions that will need to be asked, as many of those officials said, they're not engineers. They need to bring in the experts to determine what exactly happened here, what potentially was it about the snow removal process that led to this pinch point, this part where so much weight built up to the point that a massive concrete garage like that could in fact collapse. And one of the other things from that press briefing, they did say they are not concerned about other garages or other structures on the property. So that is good news, though I'm sure for anyone watching at home, if you have your car at Bayshore, if you're going there later, you're probably not parking in the garage today. Okay,
here's some sound. We got new sound from a witness who was there when this happened. Let's listen in.
Yeah, so I had an appointment that I was going to for my acupuncture because I'm a veteran, and I was coming down. Maybe 5 minutes before I left, I heard a big boom, and I was like, I didn't think nothing of it. I thought it was an earthquake. Next thing you know, I come down to get out the parking structure. I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm getting out of here today. I don't think I'm getting out of here today. I asked them what's going on, and they said it collapsed. I guess the snow was too heavy, and they piled it up on the third floor, and it collapsed on the third, up down to the second, all the way down to the fourth. Got a couple cars that's crushed, and hopefully nobody was.
And as that person said, hopefully no one was hurt. We can tell you the good news from North Shore fire officials. They have looked at the video, I'm sure going through it extremely carefully, frame by frame, determining there were a couple vehicles underneath that collapse, but no people in those vehicles at the time. They are confident no one was injured. You're seeing a map now of Bayshore Town Center, or just popped off the screen, but giving you an idea of the southwestern part of the property. So there's a lot going on with the new Target at the other end, a Culver's, more developments on the north and northeast side of the property. This is on the southwestern side, some of that redevelopment in the early 2000s, and they dated this garage back to being built in 2005 and 2006 that now has a whole lot of different activity inside it with snow and a collapse in the middle portion.
And I learned something today. They called it the Silver Spring Parking Garage. Never knew it had a name. I always call it the Trader Joe's parking garage. Or, you know, if you're heading to Kohl's and you want to swing in like the Gap or something, that's where you park in this parking structure. And so the work that will happen, they say they will be on scene for the next couple of hours because while they are fairly certain nobody's inside the vehicle, they want to see it with their own eyes. So they're taking Bearcats and they're moving the snow and concrete, and they know there are 2 vehicles inside that collapsed portion of this parking garage, and they're going to get to those vehicles and just see it with their own eyes and make sure there's no one under there. So that is the work that is currently happening here at Bayshore, as just an incredible scene. Again, the mayor saying we dodged a bullet in this one.
If you're one of the people who just learned that you won't have your car potentially for months, you might want to get on the phone with an insurance agent, start to put some plans in place. Unfortunately, there were other cars parked on that 2nd and the 3rd level of the structure, and because this is the only ramp in or out of the parking garage, the officials say it could be months before that's rebuilt or safe to the point that they'll actually be able to move a car out of that garage and get it free from that wreck.
So we're going to keep our eyes on this, and obviously we've learned partial parking structure collapse at Bayshore Mall. There are 2 vehicles inside. No one was injured. We have crews on the scene. Our coverage continues at fox6now.com. You can follow along there, and we will bring you the very latest at Fox 6 News at 4. For now, for Carl Deffenbaugh, I'm Ben Handelman from the Fox 6 studios. We're going to return to regular programming and bring you the very latest on Fox 6 News at 4.